I was 14, and I found a piece of PVC pipe about that big around. I took a bicycle inner tube, and I fit it inside of that PVC pipe. And I could pull that tube through the pipe, and I could launch a potato over 2 houses. I had a cannon. I took this cannon and I mounted it in my tree fort. Now, I ask you young people, adults, what good is a cannon if you don't have anything to shoot at? I had an 8-year-old brother who desired to have my attention at any cost. So I told my brother, ride your bicycle around my tree fort, and I will shoot my cannon at you. Now, my mother would skin me alive if I shot potatoes at my brother. My mother was a kindergarten teacher, and she had all these leftover kindergarten crayons, not the skinny ones, about the size of your finger. And I would take about 7 or 8 of these crayons, and I'd tie them in bundles, and as my brother would ride around the tree fort, pow, I would fire, and they would scatter like a shotgun. And he would be riding his bicycle and grinning and saying, "You missed me, you missed me." And he would go around, and Jennifer and Susan, my sisters, are watching all this, and they're laughing, and we're having a good time. And Houston comes around there, and I rear back one time, and smack, I hit him. I hit him hard. He didn't want to play anymore. Now, you know, y'all are laughing. And I appreciate that. I see the look of horror on some faces, but this is what brothers do. When my family gets together, I'm the oldest, then Jennifer, and then Houston, and then Susan, and our families all gather together for family reunion, we start telling stories like this, and we have a bunch of them. And the thing is, as we're telling the story, whoever it is, me, Jennifer, Houston, or Susan, we start to laugh. And we get to that hysterical laughter. You know the laughter I'm talking about, where you can barely speak and you're laughing. And our spouses and our kids are all watching and they're laughing, but not at the story. They can't understand it. They're laughing at us, laughing at the story. And we're laughing so hard, but Jennifer, Houston, Susan, and I all know what's happening. We were there. Now, you laughed at the story, the image in your mind, and y'all were chuckling. The thing is, if you had been there and seen this happy little 8-year-old boy riding his bicycle around, the moment those crayons impacted on the side of his shoulder and scattered, and this happy smiling face turns to shock and awe as he realizes, I am crazy, this is pain. You would have been laughing to the point of tears. Because Jennifer, Houston, and Susan and I, when we share family stories, we end up laughing to the point of tears. The rest of the family sits there and they laugh. But they don't laugh to tears because they weren't there. They didn't experience that moment when that sweet little 8-year-old boy face transfixed into pain. And believe me, that's hysterical. In 1 John chapter 1, I'm going to read this. I read several different translations, and I found this version. This is the Message. So the screen's going to have it up here, and y'all can follow along right there unless you have the Message with you. 1 John chapter 1, 1 through 4 is what I'm reading. From the very first day, we were there, taking it all in. We heard it with our own ears. We saw it with our own eyes, verified it with our own hands. The word of life appeared right before our eyes. We saw it happen. And now we're telling you in most sober prose what we witnessed was incredibly this. The infinite life of God Himself took shape before us. We saw it. We heard it. And now we're telling you so you can experience it along with us. This experience of communion with the Father and His Son, Jesus Christ. Our motive for writing is simply this. We want you to enjoy this too. Your joy will double our joy. Now, when John wrote this, he had already walked with Jesus. He saw Jesus crucified. He saw Jesus resurrected. And so when he's saying, I want you to experience this, we won't be able to experience touching Jesus or listening to Jesus teach a group of people. But he doesn't want us to experience that. He wants us to experience the relationship with Jesus, the relationship with God. When John first met Jesus, Jesus had been teaching around the Sea of Galilee, around that region. And he was gathering large crowds with him. Matter of fact, there was one time that Jesus was going to teach, and he had to stand in the bow of the boat, and they pushed the boat back so that all the people could gather, and Jesus could stand out there and teach to them. And John saw all of this, and he heard this. And Jesus went to John, and he said, hey, John, follow me. I want to make you a fisher of men. And John put his nets down, got out of his boat, and began to follow Jesus. Now, John is a fisherman. His family is fishermen. And in that period of time, this is your destiny. You're going to be a fisherman. Your dad's a fisherman. Your grandfather was a fisherman. This is who you are. This is what you do. This is your life. But John heard Jesus. John saw Jesus. And when Jesus said, John, follow me, John left what the world had told him. This is your world right here. This is it. John left that to follow Jesus. In 1986, I was living in Montgomery, Alabama. I call this my prodigal period. And I was sitting on the side of my bed, and I was miserable. I didn't like my life. There was no joy in my life. There was no peace in my life. I had a great job. I had a bad life. And I sat on the side of my bed, and I said, God, I'm tired of this. I feel like a dog that's just chasing his tail. I'm looking for it. I'm looking for it. I can't get it. And I know you have it. You see, I'm a preacher's kid. I grew up hearing all about Jesus. 8 years old, I got baptized. 8 years old, I got baptized because all my friends were getting baptized. I just did it because my friends did. 1986, on the side of that bed, that's when I said, I'm tired of chasing my tail. I'm tired of trying to find the joy and the peace that this world isn't offering. Jesus, I need you. Be my Savior. Be my Lord. At that moment, no angels. No heavenly choir that I could hear. It was just me in my apartment. I went to work that day. I worked at Parisian. I was their personnel manager. I walked in and I heard that Parisian had announced a brand new store opening. Pensacola, Florida. God. That was when God spoke. Because God said to me at that moment, David, come home. I grew up in Pensacola. When I left Pensacola to go to college, young people, I'm leaving this town. I will never live here again. Goodbye. That's the way I felt. And what does God say? Come home. Come home to Pensacola. So I called the personnel director for Parisian, Mr. Ammerman. I said, Tom, I heard we're opening Parisian in Pensacola. I want that store. And he said, David, we have a personnel manager. We don't need you. I said, do you have a shoe department manager? I used to do shoes. He said, yeah, well, you haven't hired anybody there yet, but that's not where you're going. That's a demotion. That's a step down. That's not the direction you go. I said, yes, I want to go to Pensacola. I need to go to Pensacola. You see, That's the step of commitment to following Christ for me at that moment. I surrendered, and now my first act of obedience for him is to go to Pensacola. I took the demotion. I left and moved to Pensacola. My experience is just like John's. John left the career. John left what the world said, this is your future, to follow Jesus. I left my career. I took the demotion. I went to Pensacola. As a matter of fact, I stayed at Pensacola for 9 months when God said, okay, the next step of faith for you is I want you to quit Parisian and become a full-time minister. Whew. I said, okay. And I took that next step. But it began with that first step of saying, yes, I need you, Jesus. John had an experience of leaving his career to follow Jesus. I had that same experience. So when he's talking about this and he's saying, I want you to have the same experience, he's talking about the relationship. The same experience John had, I had. Just different circumstances. Remember, he said, we're telling you so you can experience it along with us. This experience of communion or relationship with the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ. You know, as you read the first 4 books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospels, you see where John has all these experiences with God, where he walks with Jesus and he sees Jesus heal the blind. He sees Jesus heal the deaf. He sees Jesus touch a lame man and the man gets up and walks and dances. He sees Jesus raise the dead. Now, I'm not going to see Jesus come in and touch a lame man in this worship service and him get up and dance. I'm not going to see Jesus walk on the water, but I can still see God at work. 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call on a Sunday, 2 weeks ago, and Georgia Traylor was in the hospital. Georgia had gone in feeling sick that morning, and when they examined her, they determined that she had cancer. Very bad cancer. And when I got the phone call, I said, I'm up there, I'll go see her. I didn't know what to expect when I walked into her room. When I walked in, some of the grandkids were sitting there. Georgia's sitting up and she's laughing. And she's smiling. And I walked in the room and Georgia looked at me and she beamed. She said, David, how are you? It's good to see you. And we began to talk and visit. And during this conversation, Georgia looked at me and she said, David, I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm at peace with where I am in life right now. It's going to be all right. That was 2 weeks ago. Last Sunday, Georgia passed away. And there is no doubt in my mind that she stepped right into the presence of God. You see, John saw Jesus heal the sick. John saw Jesus change lives. I saw Jesus give Georgia the peace that passes all understanding, that guarded her heart and the strength to deal with the circumstances of life. In John chapter 14, verse 26 and 27, Jesus said, but the advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and remind you of everything that I've said to you. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not be afraid. Later on, John records Jesus saying this, and he puts it in John 16:33. Jesus said, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you'll have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. We don't get a free pass from trouble, but what we get is the promise of the presence of God. We get the power and the peace of God. We get the experience of God providing for every one of our needs, just like John did. The same experiences. Now, John had different events in his life. He lived 2,000 years ago. I've had different events in my life. Georgia had different events in her life. But all three of us would be able to testify that when the circumstances were difficult, when trouble was there, so was God. Right there beside us. My peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I know that, Bubba said if we raised our hands, we could come up with testimonies of what God is doing. I know right now I could ask you to testify, and you can say, I can give an example of God giving me strength. I can give an example of God at work in my life, just like John, just like Georgia. God desires to have that relationship. And that's what John is saying. I want you to have the same relationship with God that I have. I told you, I sat on the side of my bed in 1986. And I prayed and I made this commitment. But a commitment is only words until you put action to it. You can talk a good talk, but it's when you make that step that commitment becomes real. You step away from the world and what the world tells you is satisfying. You step away from all of that running around in circles and you step towards Jesus. That's the commitment. Leaving the false peace, the false security of the world, and finding the real peace and the real relationship with God. We're about to see a video of a man who the world will tell you, this dude has it all. And yet, he doesn't think so.
Everyone's here. Brady has already become a bigger star than Carl Yastrzemski, Larry Bird, or Bill Russell.
You go out with Tom and you just kind of feel sorry for him in a way, kind of, because he's just getting bugged all the time. We float through there. They just see a big, overweight white guy. That's pretty normal out here. But there's Tom Brady. I mean, everybody wants to be around Tom.
Can you go out to restaurants?
If I have the energy to deal with, putting a happy face on, sometimes I don't feel like that.
Now, you seem a bit the reluctant star.
Well, the problem is you can't have one without the other. You can't have the football fame and not the other stuff. So, in a lot of ways, I've created this myself.
Just what you always wanted.
You're right. It has. And I didn't think it came with all the other baggage, though.
In addition to his success on the field and his sex appeal off it, there is also the $60 million 10-year contract to play with the Patriots. It's less money than Peyton Manning and even some journeyman quarterbacks are making, but Brady wanted to leave some money on the table for the Patriots to hire free agents to help them win another Super Bowl.
I used to get $600 dorm checks and go eat Subway and use pizza cards to get my way through college, and eat baked potatoes and make pancakes every night. So I don't think that's ever been a big thing for me. I mean, I'm making more money now than I ever thought I could ever make playing football.
He's turned down multi-million-dollar endorsement deals because he didn't think they were right for him. And many of the ones he's taken, he's shared with his teammates.
You guys have to go everywhere with me?
But with all that money, fame, and career accomplishments, we were surprised to hear this from him.
Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? I mean, maybe a lot of people would say, hey, man, this is what it is. I reached my goal, my dream, my life is... Me, I think, God, it's got to be more than this.
What's the answer?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew.
I know. This man has it all, according to the world. Super Bowl rings, lots of money, fame, and yet he says, there's got to be something more. He's still chasing his tail. He still hasn't found more. That more is the relationship with God. That's once again why John writes, we're telling you so that you can experience it along with us, this experience of communion with the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ. We want you to enjoy this too, and your joy will double our joy. I told you a commitment is more than words, it's actions. And I know that there are those right now, you're still chasing your tail. You still haven't found it. It's right here. A relationship with Jesus Christ. The same experience that John had 2,000 years ago, you can have today. Peace that passes all understanding. The assurance of a relationship with God that no matter where you are, no matter what is going on in your life, God is right there beside you, prodding you, disciplining you, always encouraging you to take that next step with him. It just comes down to the choice. Yes, or I'll chase my tail a little while longer. Let's pray.